So
Okay.
thank you so much for agreeing to talk to us.
Oh,
Um,
it's a pleasure. It really is, because this MOOC for me has it's been something I've really been waiting for.
oh, that's fantastic. Before I ask you some of those questions I sent, can you just tell me a little bit about yourself, about how you came to be involved in this field, and
Oh,
what your actual sort of work and background is, and your interest in the area?
oh, crumbs. What a question. Okay, I mean, when I was a child, I was 3 months in hospital for a whole lot of brain operations because of hydrocephalus, which meant that I was I wasn't actually disabled, but the the family was protecting me.
Mm.
And because of that, I ended up going searching for people who were also, you know, uh, seen as different by their families.
Right. Yeah.
It's not that you're, uh, it's not that they don't like you, but they just value you in a slightly different way. They don't, you know, uh, um, how can I explain that? They don't see you as the same as everybody else.
So you have
Um,
a shared experience with other people in situations like
and,
that.
and and that, yes, and so that was in the 1960s, and then through that, um, it's meant that I've always been looking out for things. So when 27 years ago I came to Turkey, and then I was looking out because I was actually working with different groups in Manchester, and and uh, things seemed to be fine. And then when I moved here 23 years ago, starting to look out for, okay, where are the disabled people? And there just weren't any to be seen,
Hmm.
because the system didn't allow them to get out. It
Wow.
didn't give them a reason for getting out.
Mm.
They didn't have employment.
Mm.
And so essentially what's happened is that over those years, a key point was in 1995 when I was teaching English. I was I made I met a blind person who wanted to learn English, and the head of our school, the owner of our school, said, "Oh, well, he wouldn't be able to speak anyway." Um, and I challenged him. We got him on, and through that person, I ended up going to school for the blind to see if we could get some textbooks. And through that, I couldn't get the textbooks, but I met the kids.
Yeah.
And some of those kids are now teachers, graduate students, and we are working together. There's a very strong group which is called the Visually Impaired in Education group,
Hmm.
and they are changing the laws.
So
They are changing
is
opportunities.
is
And so
sorry.
in a sense, what's happening here is that um, the few people who set out to look for something, when they're alone, it's much harder to find something.
Mm.
Because you're basically looking for a needle in a haystack. But what this MOOC is doing is it's bringing people together. It's like a catalyst.
So in what way have you found that worked in your setting, of using the MOOC to be a catalyst? How did that
Okay, so
actually work out?
what has happened is that, in a sense, this MOOC, right? According to my notes, right, 25 years ago there was no internet,
Yeah.
so there were the connections were extremely limited and very laborious, right? The only examples that existed were examples of what was being done in the US
Hmm.
and in the UK. And those were not appropriate for countries where the infrastructure was extremely limited, shall we say, where legislation was nebulous. There were laws, but they weren't actually brought together, and they were not implemented. People didn't know about their rights, and because of that, the few examples that existed 25 years ago were not transposable.
Hmm.
They involved a lot of technology, and so what was happening was, in those days, someone, let's say, who was rich and had a disabled child would say, "I'm going to do something for Turkey. I will bring in equipment, or I will build ramps. But that doesn't change anything. That's just sort of, it's like putting a beautiful vase in a glass cabinet. What is needed, we need to get people to have knowledge. We need people to get the concepts. And then we need to build connections, and we need to build confidence. And what is happening through this MOOC is the people who are already doing something are able to connect with others. What the MOOC has done is it's presenting the program, which allows people to learn. And then there is a Facebook page, and I think the Facebook page needs to be presented far earlier in the course. And also, there is now the beginning of some a basic website, so that all the materials can be found at key materials. Right, okay. The website would mean that the key materials can be present. Nah, hang on, I'll start again. With Ike, we started to develop a website so that the key materials that are used on the MOOC are available outside the times of the MOOC. Yeah. And why is this important? Because I actually, inspired by the MOOC, I set up, I prepared a whole program for a course which is called Inclusive Foreign Language Education. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And this course, we hope, will be presented to students of English language teaching. And I got permission. I was able to use certain sections of the textbook that you use in the course. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. A lot of the examples are really important because, okay, something that is done in the US is fine because you've got all the structures, you've got the laws, you've got the, the awareness that exists in the States. But when you try and do something in a remote village and you've got one really keen teacher, what do you need to present her? You can't say the laws, you can't say the infrastructure, but she might have one very keen brother or an uncle or a sister who really wants their sibling to be able to get access to education. And so if we can get the information so that that person who might not speak that much English, but who has enough from the MOOC to be able to understand the concepts, good enough. It's not a matter of perfection. Mm-mm. Mm-mm. Right? And that is where this MOOC is, to me, it was like, it was exactly what I would have needed 25 years ago.
Sorry, we came a bit late.
No. But that's okay, because, you couldn't have done it 25 years ago. Right. Because what it needed was all these people to struggle and struggle and struggle. I mean, you know what a bell curve is? Mm. Right. To me, the bell curve, in the middle, you've got the mass of people who, if you tell them to do something, will shift. Right. You've got, and then the sort of towards the edges, you've got, okay, if we go towards the positive side, you've got a group of people who will actually follow if someone leads. They are motivated, but they don't have the initiative to stand up and take the first step. And then at the extreme tip, you have those people who will do something even if there's nothing, right. Even if nobody believes, even if people say, go home and watch a soap opera, nothing's going to change, right?
But Claire, can I just interrupt you, because I'd love to hear more about your inclusive foreign language education course that you created. So to explain to me a little bit about what you've done and what you envisage, because that's what we're quite interested in understanding, is in what way is the material that Judy and Chum have created being used and can be used in ways that aren't just in the MOOC. So
right. I mean, what's happened with the inclusive foreign language education, I told my friend who's the head of the department, and and he's actually in the past invited me to do individual sessions with his students, and he's saying, well, these people, we have them for 4 years, and at the end of 4 years, what do they know about classroom management? What do they know about inclusion? What do they know, and what are they able to do?
Mm-hmm.
So what we talked about, he just challenged me. He said, come on, Claire, what if next semester you have a course?
Yeah.
And so I prepared the whole thing, 15 weeks worth,
Sure.
3 hours a week.
Wow.
And previously, 12 years ago, I had another course that I was given, and that was in general for the Department of Education. And I inherited a course of a professor who'd retired, so I couldn't change any of the titles or anything, but I was told you can do whatever you want with the content. And for 3 semesters, I gave this course, which was called Working with Disabled People.
Right.
And every week, I invited a friend who was disabled
Mm-hmm.
to come and talk with my students. And by the end, and this is something I would love to, perhaps in a different situation, we could come together and talk with a few people who would be interested in doing something, because of my situation of someone actually threw it at me. You don't even have a master's. Well, I'm sorry, the master's that I wanted to do didn't exist.
So are you based at a college or a university or a school?
I'm based at the Middle East Technical University,
Okay.
which is now celebrating its 60th year.
Yeah.
It was set up in crumbs. It was set up in 1956, so the 60th year was last year, with a lot of US funding.
Right.
And the shape of our campus is actually that of a gun pointing at Moscow, and the trigger is the president's office.
We won't go there. But Claire,
It was set up in the middle of the Cold War.
But Claire, are you this 15-week course you just talked about developing? Is that for teachers? It's for teachers that are doing a 4-year degree.
No, it's for people who are training to be teachers.
Yes. Okay, teachers
And
in training. Yeah.
And this to me is really important, because once they become teachers, their agenda changes. They don't see themselves as learning anymore. They're focused on doing what they're expected to do.
Yeah.
So this is really, really important.
Yeah.
Get them before the mold has, the
Right.
concrete has set in the mold.
Quite right.
Right. Get them when they're enthusiastic and they think that they can still be developing themselves.
Yeah. So did you manage to download some of the videos from Chioma and Julie's course and use them offline in your course along with the
Right.
textbook?
Okay, what you see, this is where the tricky thing happened. I prepared the whole thing, and I can send you the program that I developed. What happened was my friend was really happy, presented it to the meeting, and then the teachers there were sort of saying, yeah, well, do we really need this? And who's she? She's an outsider. And so you end up getting all these sort of hierarchical situations coming into play.
So did the course not happen? That it did not actually.
It hasn't happened yet.
Okay.
But what we're talking about is, what if we actually designed this as a MOOC? Right? Which for me would not be easy, because I'd be starting from absolute scratch. And what's happened here is, I joined this university in 96. In in that very first semester, I spoke with my first blind student here. Why blind? Because they're the ones that they're obvious, right?
Yeah, they can
if someone's
see them.
deaf,
Yeah, that's
if
right.
someone's deaf, if someone's deaf, you can't see that,
Yeah.
right? And then that student took me to the student group that had been established in 1991. We then later found out that he's a relative of my mother-in-law, which sorted out my situation in that direction too. But so it's like the road is never straight, and that's where sort of 25 years ago, if I had wanted to do something, and that's where a lot of people, when they start something, they think, okay, I'm going to take this information, talk to my director, and she will allow it. Right? It doesn't happen like that. Because you've got to find the people who are actually interested.
So the course you've developed, you're still trying to get it through the system. Is that what you're saying?
I might, yes. So I've got the course, I've got the program, the contents, the activities, but it didn't. It's sort of at this point it's not aborted completely, but it's not going to happen here immediately. But what we are talking about is, okay, could we at least get some steps of it into a sort of a mini MOOC format? Because if we can do that, then why foreign language education? Because foreign language education, you're talking about, okay, it's mainly people who are learning to teach English, and so all the materials are linguistically accessible.
Right.
If you're talking about someone who's learning to teach French or Russian or whatever, then these materials are not so appropriate. But what I found in the past, because I grew up in France, in the past, as soon as I was online in 1996, I started connecting with people absolutely anywhere. I think one of my first contacts was in Hong Kong, because I could find my friend from the past. But at one point, I found someone who was deaf in Côte d'Ivoire. And if you find one person and you can give one person who speaks French or who speaks English, then you can start to get information flowing. And that is why this course is so important.
Yeah, I agree.
Because English, there are certain sections of the course I feel if the English could be simplified. Right. Into plain English, but that's something that happens eventually. Right.
So at the moment, so Claire, the reason I'm interested you're focusing on inclusive foreign language education, is that because that's your particular field rather than not just general teachers incorporating into classrooms?
Sure. And that's okay. Yesterday we did a training. So I'm what happened in 2004? I was appointed as the disability support coordinator for the Middle East Technical University, and in those days there was nobody else in such a position anywhere in Turkey. I'd sort of, I'd got there. Okay, one day it was announced, Claire's the Middle East Technical University Disability Support Coordinator. I didn't know what to call myself. There was no precedent. But the way I organized it, before that, I'd made sure when they were preparing the Turkey's first Disability Act, I asked for one sentence. I'm sure that others also ask for that sentence, but we don't know about them. And that's the beauty of this MOOC. All these people that previously we didn't know about are being brought together.
So are you still the disability support coordinator for the Middle East University?
I was removed from that 5 years ago.
And so,
on the grounds that I didn't have a master's.
And so you're just in the department as an extra sort of support person now? Or?
No. I qualified as an English teacher. Now, you see, what's happening is all the standards are being raised. At the moment, if I applied to become an English teacher, I wouldn't be able to. Because previously, I could get in with a teaching certificate. Then the teaching certificate eventually became only people who had trained for 4 years as English language teachers. Now they're even expected to have a master's.
Yeah.
So the barrier is rising, and this is a serious barrier for people with disabilities, because what happens is you manage to get to one level, and then they say, but you don't have a qualification in, X. And so that each time they're adding one more requirement. And those extra requirements are barriers.
Yeah, absolutely. But Claire, I wanted to understand your position, but I was trying to, from my point of view, of trying to see the uses and values of the MOOC. We'd understood when Choma and Judy developed the course that it were most useful for teachers currently in school-level classrooms.
Right.
So, but I hear you talking about quite a lot of other interesting contexts. But can you comment a bit on the school-level classroom use, and are you connected to that in any way in your context and so on?
Okay, I'll add something more, and then you can ask me another question.
Okay.
Right. Okay. So 5 years ago, after I was removed from the previous position, and in that previous position, I connected as many Turkish universities as possible.
Wow.
I am still the person who manages an inter-university platform, electronic platform on disability and university.
Fantastic.
And we have over 550 people on that.
Sure.
And I'm going to advertise the MOOC there.
Great.
Right. And so, and I'm also still involved with and I've been doing this for 14 years now. There's a student student society, which was established in 1991 as the Friendship and Solidarity Society.
Yeah.
And then in 2003 we transformed it into the Metu Without Barriers Society.
Lovely.
Because it's a more rights-based and positive name. And there we're doing a whole range of activities, raising the awareness of anybody who's on campus and some who come from outside. Okay, the student support office, that is continuing. And they are responsible legally for providing the necessary support for students who disclose a disability. Right. Now, one of our problems is students don't disclose. In Britain, 10% of university students disclose a disability. Here, we're still below 1%, significantly below 1%. But every Turkish university has to have a disability unit.
That's good.
And that's something I was able to ensure with others that it happened.
That's fantastic.
And we also, for 10 years now, we have had annual workshops on disability and university.
That's really very useful to promote that.
And they're all small steps, but when they happen not once but twice and 10 times, then people start to really believe something is happening. Right. Now, 5 years ago, I started back at the Department of Basic English, where we teach all students enough academic English so that when they get into their departments, they will be able to follow academic courses in English, do homeworks in English, do their research in English, and do their exams in English. Okay, fine. Out of our 3,000 students, don't we have any disabled students? Yes, we do. And so I am the person who is responsible for coordinating disability support there. And it's very interesting because people who manage to get into such a high level university, very often, a lot of disabled people won't be able to get into our universities, which is why it's important for the information to go out to all universities. And those who do often are reluctant to disclose because they feel they will be discriminated against. So actually having someone that is there so that the student can come, but also so that the teacher can come. And what happens now, and it's beautiful the way teachers will say, oh, Claire, I've got one, I'm going to send them to you. And you can feel that relief in the teacher when they just feel, okay, Claire, I've noticed someone and I'm going to pass them on. Which reduces their anxiety. And what I feel the MOOC does brilliantly is show how this reduction of anxiety in the teacher is so important. When the teacher stops feeling anxious, they can actually focus on what is necessary.
Exactly. So, but as you're saying, trying to get teachers to be able to access the MOOC materials isn't easy because of the fact that it's not offered all the time, and so on. Is that what you're pointing to, Claire?
Okay, and then that's with Ike. We also started this website, and we need to get more of the materials onto the website. I won't be able to follow the MOOC this time, but I think that as the MOOC is going, if we can get more of the materials onto the website, we essentially need to get this material out. The MOOC is fantastic for people who want to be able to take a regular course and be guided.
Yeah.
Now, what happens after the course?
Yeah.
What happens for people like me who are going to be saying, yeah, I don't have time to join the MOOC this time, but I know somewhere on that course, there was that group in, was it Zanzibar? Right? And why? Because there you've got a group, it's Muslim. Okay? Relevant. Right. Now, actually, if you don't put that bit when you do the editing, I'd be happy.
Okay.
Right. But I think it is important. Right. When you prepare the MOOC, you don't know which parts of the MOOC will be relevant to whom.
Yeah.
Because you have no idea who's going to be taking it.
Yeah.
So, for instance, one person will say, hang on, that child, it's like a child. Didn't I have a child like that in my class, And someone else will be saying, my little 2-year-old is going to be growing up, and in 3 years' time, I'm going to be trying to get that kid into school. Who do I need to talk with? And so that's where the material in the 5th and 6th week is really important. Right? Or people, and I'm going to be sharing this so wide, people who are not disclosing a disability. Right? And I had a beautiful situation the other day when one student wrote to me, she's calling for support for her master's, which is on disasters and disability. And she posted on Facebook and said, would anybody be willing to talk with me about this? And I happened to notice it. And she was someone that started at the prep school when I was the coordinator. And so I think her teacher had contacted me and said, what am I supposed to do? What can you take this student and, do something? And the student was extremely shy and sort of saying, well, no, I'm fine. Everything's all right, which is a classic. And now that student is doing a master's.
Fantastic.
And that student, we met up and she said, at first she said, oh, do you remember me? And I said, of course I remember. I can tell you where we were talking. And she said, but I didn't say anything. And I said, yes, and I remember that energy, right? And it's being there, able to feel safe with someone who's not yet disclosing, right? And then she said, I know, but I couldn't talk then. But she then told me how big a step she'd actually done by coming to study at our university, because her family were trying to protect her, and that connects with where I was when I was a kid, right? her family were trying to protect her and said, don't go outside our area, stay in the local town.
Yeah.
And she actually took this huge step and came.
Sure.
But she didn't have people that she could talk about her situation here. And then, you know, a couple of years later, she actually went and talked with someone about this, not me. And that's fine, because it's like you sow little seeds, and some of those seeds might take 2 years, 5 years, 8 years to actually start growing into a plant. And now she's actually talking about this, and it's just beautiful to watch these students develop in their own time.
Sounds like you're doing very, very impactful work, Claire. That's amazing to hear. I really admire your persistence, and you've described a long, long journey of of campaigning around this issue. So you clearly are someone who was ripe for making use of it. But I mean, I don't know if there's anything you can also just help us to, because we're trying to understand. I heard about some of your issues with and how we need to extend it. But if you have anything to share with us about knowledge you have of, if it does get used, I know there are limits. What you've been describing is how it's locked into a time-bound, delivery format, and it needs people to follow the course, which isn't going to suit everyone. So I think those are all really valid. But if you have anything that can help us to understand when there have been instances where it has been useful. So, you in one way you described it to me to say when you created your new course, which is still going to see the light of day, but that was a way you could use the materials and mix and match. And are there other examples that you're aware of in your context where that's been able to be useful?
Okay, I mean, for me, what the MOOC was so important for was that when I first started out, I was looking for examples, and the only examples I knew about were in the UK and the US. And those examples were not transposable. So that then you're left high and dry. But the examples, the wide variety of examples that the MOOC gives from different countries and different situations in Africa, there, it's one of those, it's something, well, people will look at that and say, oh, I can do that. And that is giving people that confidence to have a go. That is what is important. Have a try. Like, the inclusive foreign language education, I'm doing bits of it. Even though it's not, I can't do it the way I want. What we're doing is we're talking with students of English language teaching, and we're going to do simple parts of it. It might not be a full course, but the disability awareness training, how to the disability awareness training, and that includes starting with a whole collection of all the words. No, hang on. No, scrap that. I mean, right. The textbook that you use in the MOOC is extremely relevant globally. And that is something, so many of the textbooks which exist other than this one have been talking about examples of good practice which are depending on systems, that are depending on finance, that are dependent on a lot of monitoring. And that is something that you can't say when you have a teacher who's in the east of Turkey, whose head teacher is possibly worrying about the inspection that's going to happen. And for instance, in the section of the MOOC that talks about community, that is so important. Looking at what you have got. And I suppose that's the way I've done it subconsciously over these years, or also consciously. And so essentially the MOOC is clearly explaining the concepts and the knowledge. It's providing the examples. And so this is where we need people to move on from the providing equipment and feeling sorry for people and feeling that they've done their own piece. No, it's a constant, permanent, sustainable situation that is required.
That's very, very helpful, Claire, because it sounds to me from what you're saying is that it's been most useful for people like yourself who are already you're sitting in a context where you can see the problems. It offers ideas and resources that you could then use and take further. So this is not necessarily, from what you're saying, Claire, not necessarily going to reach the teacher sitting in the remote rural area, but somebody who's noticed the problems of that teacher would be able to, take the MOOC and download some of the material and use it. So that's very helpful to understand the kind of uses of it, and to encourage that.
Yes, and so while it was designed originally for the primary school teacher, it's actually potentially affecting so many more people. And yes, my situation is a person who's been trying to do something for years and working with individuals, and this is bringing it all together.
That's great. I really appreciate your time, Claire, and talking to us, because I've heard from the team at the Disability Studies Division that how passionate and you've been so supportive of their initiative, and it's been great. So Don and I are from the production team side, and we're just trying to see, well, having created this course in their mind, what it was going to do, what is it actually, what is the impact, and people who are taking it, what are their value or the finding out of it, so finding from it. So it's been very, very helpful to hear your perspective. And what we will do is that we'll probably cut a longer version just for record, and then we might use smaller pieces of it that relate to some of these direct questions. So I hope you don't mind that we probably won't reflect the entire interview in it as one.
No, please don't.
Okay, so we'll cut it down.
Please don't.
And then we'll show you what it looks like, and then also we'll put it up on our website, and you'll have access to it. You can download and reuse it yourself, Claire. So, absolutely, we'd invite you to make use of it. And
if there's anything else, I mean, the way I've worked is by working with people who want to work with me. Years ago, someone from Northwestern University in the States, she said to me two things. She said, if you want to change things, work with allies and go for low tech.
Yeah, that's very good advice. Very good advice, yeah.
And ever since, work with allies, go for low tech. I've been using that for 15 years.
Sounds like you're very successful in your approach. So that sounds like a good way to go.
And so by cutting it down, and if my allies don't exist here, I'll find allies in South Africa.
Yeah, great.